The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky over the Black Hills of South Dakota was a pale, bruised gray. The next, it cracked open like a wound, and the snow fell in thick, blinding sheets that swallowed the road, the trees, and every sound in the world. The wind screamed across the open plains, pushing hard against anything foolish enough to still be standing outside. Clara Mayes was foolish enough. She had been driving the old highway alone, the way she always did when her mind was too full and her chest felt too tight. Clara was 34 years old, a school teacher from a small town 40 miles east, and she had the kind of quiet sadness that people learn to hide behind polite smiles. She drove when she needed to think. She drove when she needed to feel like she was going somewhere, even if she had nowhere to go. She never made it far. The tires of her truck lost grip on a patch of black ice just past mile marker 17. She felt it before she understood it, that terrible weightless feeling when a vehicle stops obeying you, when physics takes over and human hands become useless. The truck drifted sideways with a slow, almost graceful horror, then slipped off the shoulder and tumbled down a shallow embankment. It did not roll. It simply dropped, nose first, into a ditch half buried in snow, and came to a hard, grinding stop against the frozen bank. The airbag hit her like a fist. For a few seconds, Clara simply sat there, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. Then the cold came. Not gradually, instantly, pouring through the cracked windshield like icy water, rushing into her lungs with every ragged breath. She tried to push open the driver's door, but the snow had packed against it, heavy and immovable. The passenger side was worse, crushed against the earthen wall of the ditch. She was trapped. She had no cell signal. She had checked before leaving, telling herself she would turn back if the bars disappeared. She had not turned back. Outside, the storm intensified. The sky had gone the color of iron, and the light was fading faster than it should have been, the blizzard eating the afternoon whole. The temperature was dropping below zero. She could feel it in her fingers first, then her toes. She pulled her coat tighter, but her coat was made for a cold October walk, not a South Dakota whiteout in the dead of February. It was not enough. She tried the horn. It blared 3 times and then died with the engine. She screamed, though she knew no one would hear her. The wind swallowed her voice the way it swallowed everything else out here, completely, without mercy. She screamed again anyway, because something in her refused to be silent, even now. Even here. She began to lose feeling in her hands around the second hour. It happened slowly at first, and then with terrifying speed. The cold worked its way inward, moving from her extremities toward her core, and she recognized with a scholar's detachment what was happening to her body. She had taught her students about hypothermia once, as part of a winter safety unit. She had explained the stages clearly, methodically, with little diagrams on the board. She had never imagined that one day she would live through those stages herself, alone in a ditch, watching the snow pile higher against her windows. Stage 1, shivering, rapid heart rate, fast breathing. She had passed through that quickly. Stage 2, drowsiness, confusion, slowed movement. She could feel its edges now. She tried to stay awake by reciting the names of her students. She got through 12 of them before the names started blurring together in her mind like watercolors in rain. Her head felt heavy. The snow outside had covered half her windshield. The world was becoming very small, very white, and very quiet. She did not hear the hoofbeats over the wind. She did not hear the horse snort, or the creak of a saddle, or the crunch of boots landing in deep snow. She did not hear any of it. By the time the truck's door was being pulled open from the outside, by the time cold air rushed in and a large, gloved hand reached for her, Clara Mayes had already slipped into the dangerous, in-between place where the body begins to give up on itself. She was dying. And someone had found her. His name was Joseph Swiftwind. He was 61 years old, a Lakota chief and elder from the Pine Ridge Reservation, and he had been riding these hills since he was 7. He knew the Black Hills the way other men knew their own faces, every ridge, every hollow, every hidden curve in the land. He could read the sky the way his grandfather had taught him to, and that morning he had seen the storm coming before the clouds even gathered. He had told his granddaughter to bring the horses in early. He had done it himself, in the end. But he had not gone inside. Something had kept him out. He would not have been able to explain it clearly to someone who had never felt it, that pull, deep in the chest, like a rope tied to something distant and urgent. His people called it many things. His grandfather had called it the voice beneath the wind. Joseph simply knew it as the thing that had never been wrong. He saddled his horse, a strong gray mare named Wikapi, the Lakota word for star, and rode west along the ridge road. The storm hit him full in the face within minutes. The cold was extraordinary, even for a man raised in it, even for a body that had endured 61 South Dakota winters. He pulled his heavy wool coat tighter and leaned low over Wikapi's neck, and the horse moved steadily, confidently, without fear. She had been in worse than this. Joseph had nearly turned back at the bend in the road. The visibility was down to a few feet. The sensible thing was to go home, sit by the fire, and trust that anyone out here was better equipped for it than he was. He was not a young man. His knees ached in the cold. His back had been bothering him since November. There was no logical reason to keep riding. He kept riding. He almost missed the tire tracks. They were already half filled with fresh snow, barely visible as faint depressions in the white, but Wikapi shied sideways at the edge of the shoulder and he looked down and saw them. One set of tracks, veering sharply left. Then nothing. He followed them to the edge of the embankment and looked down. The truck was barely visible, almost entirely buried. If he had come through here 20 minutes later, he would have ridden right over it without knowing it was there. He stood in his stirrups and stared, and then he was off the horse before he had fully decided to move, sliding down the embankment on the heels of his boots, grabbing hold of the truck's door handle. It was frozen shut. He pulled harder, setting his weight against it, and felt the ice crack around the seal. The door groaned and then gave way suddenly, swinging open, and a wave of cold air poured out, cold air that had been body-warmed, which told him immediately that someone was inside and had been for a while. She was slumped against the steering wheel, her skin the color of old paper, her lips faintly blue. She was breathing, but shallowly, the slow, irregular breaths of a body shutting down. He checked her pulse at the throat. It was there, but faint and slow, the heartbeat of someone already half gone. He had seen this before, in other winters, other storms. He knew what it meant. He also knew that moving her carelessly could kill her. He spoke to her first, low and steady, even though she could not hear him. He called her back the way his grandfather had taught him to call back the lost, with voice, with warmth, with presence. He pressed his large, warm hands against her cold face, and he felt her twitch faintly beneath his palms. He could not get her up the embankment alone, not safely. And the cold was worsening by the minute. He made a decision. He pulled her gently across the seat, away from the crumpled driver's side, and he climbed in beside her. He closed the door against the wind. He pulled her against his chest, wrapping his heavy coat around both of them, and he reached for the emergency blanket he kept folded in his inner pocket. 30 years of riding in blizzard country had taught him to never leave home without it. He pressed his warm breath against her hair, her neck, her hands. And he began to talk to her. Quietly, steadily, in both English and Lakota, telling her to come back. Telling her she was not alone. Telling her, over and over, that the cold had not won yet. The storm howled outside. Joseph Swiftwind held her tighter and did not stop talking. Clara was somewhere she could not name. It was not dark, exactly. It was more like the light had changed, softened and pulled back to the edges, the way light looks through heavy curtains in the late afternoon. She was not frightened. That was the strangest part. All her life, Clara had been afraid of things. Of failure, of loneliness, of the particular silence that comes when you realize no one is coming for you. But here, in this soft and weightless place, she was not afraid of anything at all. She could hear a voice. It came and went, rising and falling like something heard from underwater, a low, steady voice, warm in its tone even when she could not make out the words. Sometimes the words were in a language she did not know, a language with long vowels and rhythms that felt ancient. Sometimes they were simple English. Come back, you are not alone, stay with me. She held on to the words the way a drowning person holds a rope, not because she fully understood them, but because they were there, and they were real, and they were warm. She began to feel her hands again. It started as pain, sharp, biting pain in her fingertips, the kind of pain that means blood is returning to places it had abandoned. It was not pleasant. It was, in fact, the worst kind of uncomfortable. But pain meant she was still inside her body. Pain meant the soft, quiet place was releasing her. She leaned toward the pain the way a plant leans toward sun, following it back. The voice was still there when she opened her eyes. She did not understand what she was seeing at first. There was a face close to hers, broad and weathered, with deep-set eyes the color of dark earth and lines carved by decades of weather and time. White hair, thick and pulled back. A heaviness about the jaw and brow that spoke of something solid and old-rooted. She blinked, and the face came into focus slowly, like a photograph developing. The man did not startle. He just looked at her, calmly and directly, and said, "There you are." Clara tried to speak. Her voice came out as a thin scrape of sound, barely a word. She tried again. "Where?" In your truck, he said. The ditch. You went off the road. He kept his arms around her, and she realized that she was cocooned in warmth, his coat, a metallic blanket pressed around both of them. You were very cold. You still are. But you are breathing. She looked at the windows. The snow was packed against the glass. The world outside was invisible. Who are you? She managed. Joseph, he said. He did not add anything to it at first. Then he said, I live near here. I was riding when I saw your tracks. You were riding, she repeated, as if the words required extra processing. In this storm? He did not answer that directly. He shifted slightly, keeping her wrapped tight, and said, Can you feel your fingers? She could. They were burning. Yes. Good. Keep moving them. She did, slowly clenching and releasing her hands, and the burning deepened into something more manageable. She became aware of how completely she was pressed against this stranger, his chest against her back, his arms a full circle around her, his chin occasionally touching the top of her head as he breathed. Under any other circumstances, she would have felt alarmed by this. Right now, she felt nothing but a profound and wordless gratitude. You kept talking to me, she said. Yes. I could hear you. I was, somewhere. And I could hear your voice. He said nothing to that for a moment. Then, quietly, my grandfather said that the voice can reach further than the hand. When someone is lost, you call them back with words. It has always worked. Clara absorbed this. Outside, the wind was still shrieking, the storm still absolute and merciless. But inside the small, cold cab of her ruined truck, there was warmth. There was breath. There was this man she did not know, who had ridden into a blizzard for reasons she could not yet understand, and who had wrapped himself around her like the storm was something they could outlast together. She began to cry, silently, the tears cold on her cheeks. Joseph felt it and said nothing. He simply tightened his arms, and his voice came again, low and steady, in that language she did not know, the rhythm of it steady as a heartbeat, old as the hills themselves. She was back. She was cold, and shaken, and her truck was buried in a ditch in a blizzard, and she had no idea what happened next. But she was back, and she was not alone, and for the first time in a very long time, those two things felt like enough. They stayed in the truck for another hour. Joseph had called for help on a satellite phone he carried in his stolbag, something his granddaughter had insisted he bring every winter for the last 3 years, something he had resisted and then accepted the way old men accept useful things, quietly, without admitting he had been wrong to resist. He had trudged back up the embankment through the thigh-deep snow to call from the road, where the signal was better, and then returned to the truck, to Clara, without hesitation. Help would come. It would take time. The storm was slowing the world to a crawl. So they talked. It started carefully, the way conversations between strangers always do, surface things, safe things. He asked her where she was from. She told him. He nodded, said he knew the town, had driven through it many times. She asked how long he had lived near here. He told her 61 years, give or take. He had been born on the reservation, left for college in Minnesota, come back because the land pulled him home the way it always had. She said she understood that feeling, though she had never quite found a place that pulled her anywhere. That sentence opened a door. She had not meant to say it. It had simply come out, the way things do when you have been close to death and your filters have temporarily dissolved. She looked at her hands, still pink and tingling, and felt the words hanging in the cold air between them. Joseph did not look away. He said, "What does that mean for you? No place pulling you?" And she told him. She told him about the years of quietly going through the motions, teaching because it was what she was good at, living alone because she had not figured out how not to, driving empty highways because the movement felt like purpose even when it was not. She told him about the specific kind of loneliness that looks like a normal life from the outside, the kind that fools everyone, including yourself, most of the time. She told him that she had not planned to drive today. She had simply needed to get out before the walls of her apartment closed in completely, and she had driven until the storm swallowed her. She said it plainly, without drama, because drama had been scared out of her by the cold. Joseph listened to all of it without interrupting. He had the quality that some people are born with and others spend a lifetime trying to cultivate, the ability to receive a person's truth without reacting to it, without judging it, without immediately trying to fix it. He simply held what she said, the way the hills held snow, completely, without complaint. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wife died 4 years ago this March. We were married 37 years. After she was gone, I did not know who I was without her. I had been Joseph and Margaret for so long that being only Joseph felt like half a person. He paused. I rode every day. Sometimes all day. Just to be moving. Just to feel something that was not the inside of that house. Clara looked at him. I know what it is, he said simply, to drive into a storm. The silence between them after that was different from the silence before. It was not the silence of strangers with nothing to say. It was the silence of two people who had said something true, and were resting in the truth of it, and did not need to fill the space with anything else. Outside, the storm began, almost imperceptibly, to ease. The howling dropped half a register. The snow fell more slowly. The light, if it could be called that, shifted from iron gray to something slightly warmer, the way late afternoon sometimes does in winter, a brief golden softening before the dark. Clara looked out and said, It's letting up. Yes, Joseph said. It always does. She knew he was not only talking about the weather. She thought about what it meant that this man had ridden out into a whiteout on no more than instinct, had found her by chance or by something more than chance, had climbed into a wrecked truck with a stranger and held her warm and called her back with his voice. She thought about his wife, about 37 years and then nothing, about riding all day just to feel something. She thought about what connects people, not the visible things, the shared zip codes and mutual friends and deliberate choices, but the invisible ones. The pulls. The voices beneath the wind. She said, Why did you ride out today? Really? He considered this for a long moment. I have learned, he said finally, not to question it when something tells me to move. It has never sent me somewhere I wasn't needed. Clara said nothing. She pressed her still cold hands together and felt the warmth returning, slow and steady, like belief returning after a long absence. She had needed someone today. She had not known how much, or how completely, until this stranger had answered a call she had not known she was making. The rescue truck arrived as the last of the daylight dissolved into a deep purple dusk. 2 members of the county emergency response team came down the embankment with gear and a stretcher, their voices loud and efficient in the sudden quiet left behind by the receding storm. They were professional and kind, and they assessed Clara quickly, checking her temperature, her pulse, her responsiveness. Mild to moderate hypothermia, one of them said. She was lucky. She needed to be warmed slowly, monitored, checked for secondary effects. She needed to go to the hospital. Clara nodded. She already knew she was lucky. She had known it since she opened her eyes and found herself still inside her life. Joseph helped her up the embankment, one arm steady at her back, moving slowly so she did not have to hurry. Wikapi stood at the top, patient and still as a statue, her gray coat dusted white. Clara put her hand out and the horse turned her large head and breathed warm air against Clara's palm, a simple thing, inexplicably moving, and Clara laughed, softly, for the first time in what felt like years. She likes you, Joseph said. She's magnificent, Clara said, and meant it in more ways than one. The paramedics helped her into the warmth of the rescue vehicle. She turned at the door and looked back at Joseph, who stood in the snow with his horse, his white hair loose now in the quieted wind, his face calm and unhurried. She wanted to say something equal to what had happened. She searched for the words and found that none of them were adequate. The English language, in that moment, felt very small. She said, You saved my life. He shook his head slightly. You stayed. That matters more. She did not fully understand what he meant, not right then. But she did not forget it. She spent 2 nights in the hospital in Rapid City. They warmed her carefully, as promised, and monitored her heart and her blood pressure and her temperature, and on the morning of the 3rd day they told her she could go. There was no permanent damage. Her hands were fine. Her feet were fine. Her heart, the physical one, was fine. She asked the nurse for paper and a pen, and she wrote a letter. She wrote it 3 times before she was satisfied, tearing up the first 2 drafts because they were too formal and then too sentimental, and she wanted to find something in between. She wanted to say thank you in a way that held the full weight of what she meant, not just thank you for pulling the door open, but thank you for staying, thank you for talking, thank you for telling me about Margaret and about riding all day and about the way a place can pull you home. Thank you for not treating my survival as the end of the story. She mailed it to the address the rescue team had given her, with his permission. He wrote back 3 weeks later, in careful, unhurried handwriting on plain paper. He said he was glad she was well. He said his granddaughter had made him promise to check his satellite phone battery every morning, which he was now doing. He said the hills had been quiet since the storm, and the quiet was the good kind. He said that if she was ever driving through and the pull took her west instead of east, she was welcome to stop. She did stop, that spring. She drove out on a Saturday in April when the Black Hills were beginning to green and the sky was a color so clear it almost hurt to look at. She turned west at the highway, followed the directions he had sent, and found the small house at the edge of the ridge with the wooden porch and the 2 horses in the field. He came out before she had finished parking, and he looked the same as she remembered, steady and unhurried, with those dark, calm eyes, except that now he was smiling, which changed his whole face, opened it up. They sat on the porch with coffee and talked for 3 hours, and then she helped him feed the horses, and then she drove home in the long golden light of a spring evening, the hills falling away behind her. She drove with the window slightly open. The air was cold, but gently cold, the kind you lean into. She thought about what survives. Not just bodies, not just the biological machinery that keeps going when the temperature drops and the storm closes in. She thought about what else survives, the voices that call you back, the hands that hold you warm, the truth you speak to a stranger in a ditch because death has briefly burned away every reason to keep it hidden. She thought about Joseph's words, "You stayed. That matters more." She understood it now. To stay, in a body, in a life, in a story that has not finished yet, requires something that cold cannot touch. Call it will. Call it hope. Call it the thing that listens when a voice comes through the storm and decides, against all logic, to follow it back to the light. Clara Mayers drove east into the evening. Behind her, the Black Hills held the last of the sun, golden and ancient and unmoved by any storm, standing exactly where they had always stood, waiting, as they always had, for whoever needed them to be there.